I put out another article on the Lucy Letby case to do with insulin and what we should, and well, what can help Lucy now and what can't help her in terms of the case. And so what I just wanted to say was, I'll put a link to that below, but is what can help Lucy now, basically, as opposed to what can't help her. And there's been a lot of discussions around insulin. One of the problems is Goss had said that he to the jury that they didn't need to know how she'd done these acts. So the point is that, you know, it's discussing how she could have done or not done something won't help her now, because the only thing that can help her is new evidence, because of our silly legal system, which is ridiculous, and that in order for someone to get an appeal, you have to have the new evidence, or there has to be a legal error by the judge. So discussing anything to do with whether Lucy could have poisoned anything is not any bag. It's not new evidence. But what will be new evidence is more along the lines of, you know, the letter by Chase that's been mentioned, the new letter. There was art, and that, you know, it's around the C-peptide and results and things like that, and immunoassay results. I've gone all into that in my article, so I'm not going to go into that. But I would say that right at the it didn't take long. I mean, the evidence around how these babies possibly, those results could have been, you know, the immunoassay test could have had the low C-peptide and the high insulin. Evidence about that was always available that showed that these deaths didn't have to be exogenous insulin. That was available readily already, right? And I'm a layman, I'm not a medic, but it didn't take me long to research that very early on online and to find that there were alternative explanations. If you look into, you know, the state of these babies and how sick they were, and you know, not only that the tests could have been false positives, but also that those levels in immunoassay didn't prove exogenous insulin. And so I don't buy, and my issue with the way that Lucy's defense team defended her is, right, so there's a couple of comments by Ben Myers. Well, Ben Myers should never have gone down the road of getting into whether or not Lucy could have possibly poisoned or added, you know, injected insulin, or, you know, added exogenous insulin to bags, because the reason he shouldn't have got into that discussion at all, he should have never accepted that position. It's irrelevant that Lucy agreed to that could have happened simply because she's not a biomedical scientist or a doctor. She's a nurse. She wasn't qualified to say that. She was just agreeing with so-called experts. That's irrelevant, okay? Ben Myers didn't, you know, I picked out a couple of comments from the trial. For instance, he made one comment where he said, the defense, that's him obviously, make the obvious explanation that there is nothing to say Letby exclusively was responsible for the insulin being in the bag. So he's accepting the insulin, which we know, right? Now, he should never have done this. He should never have gone down that road. He should always have gone down the road of these babies died from natural causes. And he should have been constant, and he should have never gone to that thing, because once he went to that idea that there was exogenous insulin, it was always going to be a fight to prove Lucy's innocence, that she didn't do it, basically, which is not what it's supposed to happen, but that's what did happen. And you know, it's supposed to be obviously innocent until proven guilty, but it wasn't in this case. We all know that. So, and another comment he made was during the trial was about child F. Insulin continued to be given to child F after Letby had left the unit via a maintenance bag, right? So he's saying that, well, you know, she wasn't there and whoever was adding the insulin must have been doing it after she left. Well, no. Why did he didn't have to make that, you know, he should never have gone down the road that anybody had been tampering with anything, because there was no evidence that had happened, and there was explanations for why these babies died. We know that he did retain Michael Hall, but he didn't call. I mean, Michael Hall seemed to accept that position of the exogenous insulin, but then he changed his mind later, didn't he? So, but the fact is that Ben Myers, I mean, on the other issues, he could have called Michael Hall. The legal aid in this case is a massive factor. Legal aid lawyers don't put in the time. They don't. They're not paid to you know, they struggle to get any, you know, people don't realise the legal aid situation in this country and what's going on. And that includes the civil and criminal legal aid rules regarding the retention of expert witnesses and what's going on there. But apart from the corruption, the legal aid was a factor. You know, if he'd been a private lawyer, I can assure you there would have been multiple teams of experts speaking up for Lucy if he'd have been a privately paid lawyer. I can 100% say that, so don't dismiss the legal aid thing here. But I don't think it was just down to arrogance. I think he may have had some arrogance, Ben Myers, but he knows full well that jurors are going to take the, you know, going to listen to medics rather than, you know, that this is what human beings do. Human beings defer to the title doctor. Right? I mean, there was corruption in this case, and Goss, 100% corrupt, as far as I'm concerned. I don't trust the way he conducted anything, and Goss would have had to approve, because of the legal aid rules. Goss would have had to approve any expert taking the stand, all right, as well, on Lucy's behalf. So, you know, well, Goss and his remarks as well about, you know, you don't need to know how she did it. Well, you know, I didn't think there was precedent on that, actually, that you don't, but there is precedent. He could get away with that, saying that, you know, that you can't say that was a legal error on his behalf or anything like that, because injecting the jury and saying they didn't need to know really how she murdered these babies, they just, you know, it's ridiculous really, isn't it? But he got away with that, and there is precedent on that kind of rubbish as well. So anyway, so yeah, yeah, I've linked in my article to reports that I read early on by Ellen Storm, Dr. Ellen Storm. She put out stuff very early on and on the insulin, which was interesting, especially the fact that I think it was baby Y. So you had baby F, baby L. There was another baby who had these odd C-peptide ratio insulin. And that baby's, the test was redone, which it should have been, because we know the test should have been redone, the amino acid test, because of the possibility of aberrant false positives, etc. And that test was redone for baby Y, and hey, that baby went down as natural causes. So had the test been redone for baby F and baby L, and to be honest, I mean, if there'd been real suspicion, then they would have been redone, wouldn't they? If there'd been real worry that exogenous, you know, whatever, they should have been redone. They weren't redone. But there were explanations, you know, that diabetic mother was something that should have been taken into account. And the intra I can't pronounce, but intrauterine growth retardation was another massive issue, which, you know, was just sort of ignored as far as I can make out, really, by the prosecution. Well, it wasn't sort of seen as these things were important and you know. So basically, Ben Myers should have gone for, I mean, he did try and go for no case to answer right at the beginning, didn't he? But he should have never gone down the road of agreeing about that insulin was exogenous insulin was added. There was no need to. You know, you didn't have to do that much research to find out that these babies could have died from natural causes. We know they died from natural causes. You didn't even need to be a medic to work that out if you took a little bit of time, okay? So he should never have gone down that road or entertained that fact, because, you know, once he did, that was it. Although I still maintain, and I think the main reason that Lucy Letby was, the jury went with the guilty thing, was the post-it notes, which is another thing that should never have been in court. And, but, you know, the reason I say that is because whenever I've mentioned this case to people who don't necessarily haven't been following it and don't know much about it, and you say, and they say, oh, but she confessed. And I'm like, no, she didn't. And they think that the post-it notes are a confession. You know, we know that they're not, but the jury, although the jury were told, you know, that we're not supposed to look at them as confession, they can't unsee them, right? So, another video I put out, there were a lot of sort of redactions in those post-it notes, you know, that are being sort of whited out, and it would be really, you know, why are they all redacted? They shouldn't be redacted. Again, what are they trying to hide, you know? We know there was other stuff in that post-it note, so they don't want you to see. But most people, a lot of people are surface thinkers, and they'll see something like that, and they'll see a post-it note like that, and they'll think she must be guilty. And that's, I'm not saying all the jury did that, but what I'm saying is I believe it would have been a massive factor that they wouldn't have been able to unsee. Apart from the whole thing about there must have been exogenous insulin rubbish, you know. So the other thing I want to go into is, I've gone into much more details in the article, but I won't go into them in the video, I think, because it's, and a lot of it's been covered anyway about the insulin over and over. So I just want to say that, okay, so we know that the Thirlwells put a thing back, and I put my video out on doing a little Thirlwell jungle jig. She's the third time she's delayed it again, and now so the inquests have been put back again. My interest in the inquest being put back again is because the dates again. We've got you know, they're playing games with symbolism as far as I'm concerned, yet again. And I've mentioned before about how this year the coroner's internal review for the inquest for babies C, E, I, O, P, and the reopening of the inquest for baby D was fixed for Old Beltane, the real point of Beltane, right? And then the actual inquests were supposed to be, I think it was the 14th of September. Let me double check my dates here. They were meant to be around that time in September. And actually that date, so let me find it here, is, they were provisionally set for that date, 14th of September. And that, another massive factor always to consider is Catholic Church dates, liturgical calendar as well. And the exaltation of the Holy Cross. So that is the date where it's the exaltation of the Holy Cross, and it's the Basilica on Calvary is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the Church of Resurrection, and that's built at the supposed site. I say supposed site of crucifixion or resurrection of Christ. If you believe in that, for me that's all symbolic, but it's all what's the word? Allegorical element. But if you believe in that literally, that's the site, and the date of the exaltation of the Holy Cross there is for the Catholic Church is the 14th of September. And remember, we're talking about resurrection, crucifixion, which is symbolic in Lucy's case. And, you know, we're also near around the time, September is near around the time of the autumnal equinox, the vernal equinox, the autumnal equinox, So, which is another significant, obviously, in the Celtic calendar. And then the inquests have now been put back to begin on the 10th of May 2027. And I've mentioned before that this is the second Sunday in May is Lucy Letby celebration day. Sorry, not Lucy Letby. I'm starting Joan of Arc and Lucy Letby, because the Joan of Arc day in France is the second Sunday in May. Now, that was on the 10th of May this year. Next year it falls on a Sunday, so the 10th of May is the day after. Guess what? That's when they've said it. But next year, the second Sunday in May is, so the Monday is the 10th, so the second Sunday in May is the 9th, then the day before that, right? So they've got to bring it to the Monday. So it's Joan of Arc symbolism again, you know, burnt at the stake, you know what I mean? Lucy Letby, I swear to God, she does look like Joan of Arc. The next internal coroner's review, which is what they do, you know, themselves without an involvement, you know, the actual inquest. But prior to the inquest, they can set up how they're going to do it all. Again, it's on the 10th of November, 2026. Now, the 10th of November is significant as well, because it's just after the cross-quarter day between the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. So the beginning of Hallows proper, you know, All Hallows, and the night when the Hallows, or spirits of the dead, return to this world. And this is the period when the veil is open between this world and the next. And that continues until the gate closes on the 16th of November. So that's that luminal area, that crossover period when, you know, the veil is sort of weak between this world and the other worlds. Well, there's a link with Hecate here. And she's the Greek goddess of magic and the night and the moon. Crossroads, and necromancy, and witchcraft. Well, I think it's more modern interpreting witchcraft, but it is, you know, it's magic, etc., etc. There is a difference between magic, witchcraft, and sorcery, by the way. A lot of sorcery has been used in this case, which is manipulation of the human mind, right? Witchcraft is more manipulation of nature, and magic is more taken from above and make you manifest below, right? So and there's magic, which is with the K, which is the Crowley spelling, you know. So these all mean kind of different things, right? But so 10th of May, so the link with Hecate here is, you know, she is important in this time, okay? And that is when the limit, you know, she's seen as sort of the realm of the liminal, you know, the world when the veil is thin in between. And so at this time she is an important figure, and this 10th of November is really the beginning of Hallows proper, okay, of this little period, the 10th of November going up to the 16th of November when the gate closes. So that's a crossover sort of point there. So they've put that, it's like, right, okay, I don't think that's not an accident either. 10th of November for them to do the internal coroner's review. There's links with Hecate there, Greek goddess of magic and the night and the moon. The moon obviously is you know, symbolic again with Lucy as well. Moon goddess symbolism. And I'd just like to say that another thing I mentioned was ambivalence is something that is big. Hecate was demonized, basically. The reason Hecate, the goddess, is seen as a demoness, demonized, is to do with part of that is to do with ambivalence, okay, her ambivalence. And these kind of conflictions arise in the Lucy Letby case because Lucy was judged for ambivalence, I think, in certain ways, you know, in what's the word, contradictions, things like this. I mean, as women are allowed to be contrary anyway, you know, they're allowed to, actually it's a good thing to hold two opposing views at the same time. That's some cognitive dissonance, and that's actually shows you've got high cognitive ability if you can hold two opposing ideas at the same time without collapsing it down. Most of us have to collapse it down to justify something. So for instance, if you smoke and you're trying to you could hold the idea that smoking is appalling and it's going to kill you, or it's going to give you lung cancer or something like that, at the same time as you could hold the idea that smoking's really great, I really enjoy smoking, right? You could hold those two ideas, and that would be cognitive dissonance, right? That smoking's helpful, beneficial because it relaxes you, blah, blah. But most people can't do that because to justify what they... When I say most people, I mean a lot of people can't do that. I don't know the statistics on how many people are able to be cognitively dissonant, but in order to justify your smoking and knowing that it's going to kill you, in your mind, you have to shut out that bit where you have to come down on the side with ignoring that, not really accepting that full belief that it's going to kill you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to carry on doing it, right? So you collapse that down into, you know, that it's not that bad, you know, and but we do all sorts of things. That's just one example in order to collapse down what might be two opposing. We're allowed to be contrary. Women are allowed to be contrary. Men might not be, but women are allowed to be. Lucy was judged for ambivalence as well, which is not exactly the same thing as contrariness, but this idea of conflicting ideas and stuff like this. So Hecate, that's why Hecate was demonized, and it's interesting. I think the ambivalence comes in the Lucy case. It's been mentioned around the Lucy case. They are demonizing Lucy Letby, and she will be, you know, in their cult minds, you know, compared with Lilith and Hecate and every demonic female entity they can lay their hands on, as well as seeing her as Joan of Arc, you know, up there with the amazing so-called heroes who were sacrificed, etc. I have to say, a lot of these men in power have mummy issues, and you know, and that's probably one of the reasons why some men in powerful positions get so overwrought about the idea of any woman that might have hurt a baby, whether she has or not. So they need a rebirth more than most of us, probably. And this all boils down to the cross, because when you look at the real stories underneath, if you take the Bible, but underlying meanings and code, which to do with, again, sacred geometry and numerology, and a lot of it's numbers and code, and so when it comes to Jesus dying on the cross, the symbolism now is a spiritual rebirth. Okay, we're not talking about a physical person actually being crucified. We're talking about somebody. We're talking about a rebirth, a person, the old you dying and the new you being reborn. I mean, I've just gone through another, not that long ago, another shadow thing, you know, going through the sort of another dark night of the soul as such, and I started lucid dreaming again. I've written about that as well, but it's had a real huge effect, and And I also got excluded from somewhere, which I think is to do with that shadow work I've been doing, because there's no real reason for me being excluded from this place. But it boils down to me being who I am, and this is what happened to Lucy. She got demonized for who she was. That's why I relate to Lucy's situation for many reasons. But, you know, neurodivergence. And I'm not suggesting that Lucy is new. I don't know Lucy. I've never met her, and I'm not going to get into trying to diagnose her or say she might have been this or she might have been that. So I really don't agree with all these online shrinks who diagnose people they've never met. I don't think they can diagnose people they haven't met, let alone people they haven't met. I don't know, so everything. But but to use neurodivergence as a term to just mean, you know, you may not sort of be your average person or fit in or whatever, you know, just use it like that for a minute. That's been my experience in life, and so I related to that idea that Lucy, having never met Lucy, I don't know, but the sort of idea that maybe she just couldn't, she was treated differently, you know, for whatever reason, right? And I also think the only child thing can be a problem. I mean, I'm not an only child. I mean, that doesn't apply to me. I wasn't, but Lucy was, and I've known people or had friends who were only children, and that does have an effect on how you relate to other people. I've noticed that in them, they can often have difficulties with, because they've never had to have that, you know, they haven't had other competition there as children. They find it hard to understand other people's needs. Does not make them serial killers, end of. But it can cause problems in people's relationships, okay? I've seen that happen in other people, right? So that may have been a factor, but again, I don't know. I've never met Lucy. And I think it was all blown all out of proportion, actually, you know, I saw early on there were people accusing her of being all sorts of ridiculous things, you know, like, oh, she must be schizophrenic, nutcase or something. It's just with no evidence whatsoever and no basis on which to lay that claim, okay? And so all I can say is that this happens, and it happens to women. I think, I mean, it happens to men too, right? But I think women are more judged. They're more judged for their appearance. They're more judged for if they don't fit in with the traditional, you know, idea of what a woman is. They're more judged, okay? And male narcissists, and there are female narcissists too, you know, obviously. But male narcissists are notorious for picking on vulnerable women. And, you know, yeah, that's the way it is. And again, I wouldn't want to go into any particular diagnosis of the consultants involved in the Letby case, but as in just having met many consultants in my own life and some who really come across as narcissistic, I can imagine that many consultants are bloody narcissists. They're so bloody full of themselves, and they think they honestly think they are God, and they're treated like God, which is the worst thing. I've seen them treated like God, and that's the worst thing you can do. Don't defer to these people and treat them like God. Trouble is, if you don't, they have hissy fits. I mean, I remember Jaram going on about, I mean, he was calling it battered wives, was it him and Brewery? Him and the other one? They were referring to themselves as battered wives, and I thought, you know, it's laughable, really, isn't it, that a consultant is a battered wife? I mean, maybe they felt that way, but to me, that actually was very indicative of what, not accusing Jarman of anything in particular. I mean, he's thrown himself right in it 1,000 times. I don't need to accuse him of anything. I mean, standing up there and lying in court and everything else he's done. But, and Brewery, you know, all of them, you know, the lot of them. But the battered wives remark really made me think that's exactly what narcissists do. When the tables are turned on them, they suddenly start playing victim. They go from being the big, oh, brilliant, you know, heroes to suddenly being the little victim who's, oh, so oppressed and has had it terrible all their life, and they become battered wives. Yeah, so, and then they will stop at nothing. Those people stop at nothing. When they've got someone who they believe might have shown them up or shown them up to be small or stupid or wrong, they will stop at nothing. They will literally stop at nothing. I've got experience of this in my own life. I know what they're like, and I know lots and lots of people have. It's very, very common. It's very common, these traits. So, yeah, and so that's basically it. And, yeah, the 10th of May actually also happens to be the feast day of St. Andrew of Avellino. And I'm going back to the Catholic liturgy as well. Known for his patronage against sudden death. And also St. Leo the Great, a 5th century pope, he persuaded Attila the Hun to spare Rome. Spare Rome. You know, you could almost see that as metaphorical, really, couldn't you? Do you spare Lucy? Do you spare Rome? And, you know, also it's the time of the Leonid shower as well, the Leonid shower, which comes from the constellation of Leo, the Meteorid showers. So he was Leo the Grey. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I'm just looking at, you know, other connections here. Right, so anyway, you know, I just end up, it is important to have an eye on the bigger picture, because I know a lot of people will dismiss the esoteric stuff, but it's not just taking these isolated. When you take it all together and you look at all the weird numbers that came up in the Lucy case, which I've written about and noticed, and the connections with esoteric stuff, the occult calendar, the way they've done it is so, there's too many. I don't believe in coincidences anyway, but there's too many strange links in this case. Not only her name, Lucy Letby, Lucy as in light, Letby, let there be light, and her Hebrew name, and all these other things that are so, when you add them all together, and when you know, and you know, it's a fact that the elites, you know, they all follow the Kabbalah. They're following the Kabbalah. Okay, this is in the secret societies. They follow the Kabbalah, and it's not just Freemasonry. Is just a term to encompass a lot of different secret societies, right? But it's obviously there's common purposes that is another left-wing sort of organization which has a lot of power. Was set up by Julia Middleton and Gordon Brown's government, actually. But common purpose has its fingers in everywhere, and it's massively involved in this move towards sort of the globalist digital takeover as well. It's most of the heads of schools, the heads of police forces are often common purpose, and or hospitals, you know, and that's a sinister organisation, common purpose, okay? And another one is, you know, and sort of Fabian society links there. And there's another one as well, which I have written about before, which the Freemasons, which a lot of people say, well, Freemasons not really relevant anymore because younger people aren't really joining it. Well, they're very aware of this, and so they set up something called the Round Table for younger men, right? Which is a separate thing, right? But it's gradually being linked into Freemasonry. So they are getting the younger people, but they'll do it another way. They'll do it however they can do it, as long as they maintain control of their boys' networks. They need the young men in there. And if they do it through the Round Table, hope they do it. They don't have to do it. They need them in their web, basically, their mail web. And it's females as well. I mean, there are female, you know, so the Daughters of the Nile is a Freemasonic organisation, and there's many females involved in this too. So it's not just men. There always has been, really, behind the scenes. Actually, going into Shakespeare as well, I don't believe Shakespeare wrote all those plays. William Shakespeare. But just as an aside, how they work is, if you want to go into the whole Shakespeare issue, that's a massive rabbit hole, that one. I'm trying to think of his name. Alexander Waugh, I've just remembered, has done great stuff on the Shakespeare hoax. He had podcasts out. He's just died about a year ago, I think it was, but there were some really great podcasts. If I can find them, I'll link them. He was the grandson or great-grandson of Evelyn Waugh. I think grandson of Evelyn Waugh, the author Evelyn Waugh. But the idea that Shakespeare wrote those plays doesn't really stand up. And if you do look into it, there's two schools of people. There's some people who think that Edward de Vere was behind it, that wrote them, and then there's Francis Bacon's another one. It may have been a group of them that wrote these plays, because they're propaganda. Shakespeare is propaganda, and it's got loads of code and esoteric stuff all the way through it. Okay, whoever wrote the Shakespeare plays was a massive initiate, and they also knew a hell of a lot about royalty and were really well travelled, which there's no evidence that Shakespeare was any of that. Okay. His daughter was illiterate, which is odd for someone that, but anyway, yeah. But what I'm saying, I've had suspicions around the whole Shakespeare thing, that maybe, I don't know why I'm going to Shakespeare, but it's just come up. But anyway, it may be Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I, could have had a hand in those plays. The reason I'm saying that is because you actually read them, they sound like a woman's voice, and women weren't allowed to be playwrights back then, not openly. They couldn't be playwrights back then, really. Okay, so that was more of a recent thing where women started to be. So if a woman was going to put out plays, you would have to do it through a man. And if Elizabeth I wanted to put out propaganda on it, because Elizabeth I was a very intelligent woman, okay, far more intelligent than Elizabeth II, okay, she would have been well capable of writing. And I think she may have used, whether it was Edward de Vere, a group of them, but she was, I think she actually, Edward de Vere was quite very close to her anyway, and Francis Bacon, or was it, I get mixed up with those two now, but that group of them, and she would have had all the knowledge, of course, of royalty and everything like that. So did she at least write some of it with help? And I don't know, but it's just a possibility, and definitely it was propaganda. It was used as propaganda. And one of Shakespeare's contemporary playwrights, Ben Jonson, wrote poems which might have suggested that Shakespeare was an imposter. And also there's another thing I remember, that Shakespeare was known as the Bard, and Francis Bacon, who some people think had a hand in the plays, actually Bard means a piece of bacon, but there's lots more to it than this. If you look up the whole thing, Alexander Waugh is a good start. Interestingly enough, there's another poem, The Witch's Charm, by Ben Jonson, and it was part of the 1609 thing he did, the Mask performance. Mask, as in mask as well. But, if you read the words, this is all about witches, queens and witches, and masks, I suppose. So, yeah. I just noticed the last two lines. Check out those words. Isn't that weird? Yeah, I'm thinking of Elizabeth first, not forgetting Macbeth, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron bubble. Yeah, so that's another thought. I don't know how I got onto that, because it is, how did I get onto that? But yeah, it's just the way that they operate. So when an astrology, when they start, so we know that the Nazis used astrology. It was not just the Nazis, it's all those in positions of power study the Kabbalah, they study astrology, they study this at the top of the secret societies, and everything they engineer at a level is using this occult stuff as well, and astrology, which is perfectly valid. Astronomy, astrology is one science to begin with. We're the ones in modern days they've separated out, but it's valid. It's very valid. But it's that they use it for control and dark purposes. They use it in the stock markets, and for instance, bear markets and things are predicted on the cycles of the sun and moon. Okay, so that's a fact. There's no you can double check. You can look that up. It's not something I'm coming up with on the top of my head. They use these things, right? So they are using this stuff. Now, we can debate whether they're using it in the Lucy Letby case. I believe they are. I've seen a lot of evidence, as far as I'm concerned, that they are using dark stuff in the Lucy Letby case. There are all kinds of levels to this case. You can take just the level of the trial, the level of protecting the NHS, the level of protecting the legal system, which is just a joke now. But all this stuff is by design, and the NHS having to cover up all its appalling neonatal care is on the one level, and then you go higher and higher and you get to all these other levels, which all are involved with how they control us all anyway. And because it's symbolic for them. I mean, if Lucy is this is the biggest case of miscarriage of justice that I can really remember I mean, you had the Myra Hindley and Ian Brady, which is there were murders in those cases, and that was a massive one. Although I've always wondered whether it was very convenient, that case, because it came at the time when they were trying to defer from Britain's support in the Vietnam War, of America in the Vietnam War. And they needed to defer in the newspapers. And what a great thing to have these Moors murders to talk about. That was a great distraction, wasn't it? That's always made me suspicious about that, but I don't know. I mean, the Moors murders happened. Those murders did happen. And Myra Hindley. So that was a massive case. And I just wondered at times whether they mind controlled. I don't know. But anyway, of course, the Guildford Four and the Birmingham Six, these massacres were massive, but they were involving, also there was a woman involved in the Guildford Four, but that was Carol Richardson, do with sort of so-called terrorist offences. And I've just remembered something which is interesting, so I'm going to talk about it. Many years ago, 1996, I had a friend in London, and her brother was on a bus, Brendan Woolhead his name was, in the Aldwych, and they were Irish. He was Irish. He was from Dublin. They were from Dublin, and he was on a bus, but he lived in London, and he was there was a bombing. The bus was bombed. There was a bomber on the bus. He blew up the bus. And supposedly, I mean, there was a guy on the bus who ended up being the one eventually who was done for the bombing, a young guy. Brendan survived. He was accused, and this bomb, it was meant, I think, for the Royal Courts of Justice in the Strand, but it went wrong, and the bomb detonated on the bus, and Brendan got accused because he was Irish. He was also a heroin addict. And he got accused just because he was Irish, and it was all over the papers that he'd done this, and it was appalling because he got let go 24 hours later. But he was very badly injured as well. He had head injuries and bad head injuries and pelvic injuries, and so he was in hospital anyway. But when he got away, when he got let go, they sued. Because the papers had portrayed him as a terrorist. You know what I mean? And he got a huge amount of compensation, and he eventually put himself into. Would you believe it? He paid to go into a form of drug detoxification, and what happened was this was a novel form of detoxification, which was claimed as this novel, amazing treatment. It was called, they used to call it black box treatment or something like that. And what it was, where the addicts were put under anaesthetic, general anaesthetic, and supposedly that was supposed to cure the addiction. They were supposed to wake up without withdrawal symptoms. Well, Brendan undertook this because he had all this money now, so he paid for this detox. And he died. He died whilst under this anaesthetic, having this treatment. And there was an inquest into his death, and it basically, this form of, this company that were running these detoxes were getting up to all sorts and sort of getting away with it. But what a tragedy that happened to him after being bombed on that bus, then wrongly accused of being just because he was Irish, and then it's just unbelievable. But yeah, I knew his sister in London, and obviously at the time I've made no I had a drug problem at the time. That's how I knew his sister. So anyway, rest in peace, Brendan. And this is, of course, what happened with the Guildford Four, Irish, and there was drug addiction. Some of them, Harrison and one of the others, I forget which ones were drug addicts of those, but there was drug addiction involved, and of course they're Irish drug addicts and they get accused. So I think that the Lucy Letby case is really, really massive. I mean, it's not the only case but in this country, of a female that has been so demonised. We know that there's Colin Norris and the other male nurse, Ben Geen, and we know there's the Dutch nurses, and we know there's others who've been falsely accused. I know there are also some questions over Beverly Alice. But this is a massive, massive case of a woman who's accused to be a witch, basically, the modern witch. And this will be something that they will be using on all kinds of levels, both to distract us as well as play out their sick games. And so, and Lucy has just become a pawn in the game. And I hope anyway that the CCRC, well, so basically what I was started off, I got completely off the subject now, but is what can we do now? What can help Lucy? And what can help Lucy now is basically new evidence or any legal error that can be found that Goss made in the trials. And yeah, the main things there that can help her now. Or the other thing that can help her is continue publicity, as much publicity as possible. And there are other things that could help Lucy, which I've mentioned before, which would be, massive non-compliance. But the likelihood of that happening, that would take prison officers to turn around and say, no, we're not doing this. And that would involve a complete kind of revolution, really, and prison governors to walk away, prison officers to, all this. But even that wouldn't lift Lucy's conviction. You'd have to have a total revolution. So she needs an appeal, and she needs to be vindicated. She needs to have her convictions quashed. And the CCRC should hurry up. I mean, they can hurry this case up if they want, because they can use the public interest excuse, and I've spoken about that before. Because there's a long queue with the CCRC, and how would it be fair for them to jump the queue when there's other people? But Lucy Letby's case, because of its significance and it to the legal system and to the NHS, they could use the public interest excuse to hurry it up. Or they can just continue to delay. Let's see what they do. But Lucy needs those convictions quashed, because it's no good like her being pardoned by the king, or I hate calling him king, but Charles, because that doesn't remove the conviction. It's just mercy, and that leaves her out in society very vulnerable. Whatever happens, she's going to be vulnerable, because there's going to be people who still think she's guilty even when she does come out. There'll still be people who are quite bigoted in their belief, and so it won't be easy for her. But if she does have if she has her convictions quashed, that will go a long way to her being able to make another life, You know, it's not going to be the same, and she's going to have been very changed by all this, but hopefully there'll be positive things that can come out of it. The question is, how long? You know, it makes me quite angry that, you know, this is a young woman's life this is the best, should be the best, you know, the most productive, best years of her life, her young life, that are being taken away and ruined by these sick bastards who seem to think that our legal system's just a joke now. It's a total joke. It's not even, well, I don't call it a justice system. I haven't called it a justice system for a long time. It's not a justice system. It's got nothing to do with justice. A system which depends on money has got nothing to do with justice. And if it depends on money, how good a defence you can get, then it's got nothing to do with justice. End of. End of. Shouldn't be called a justice system. Any system that's dependent on money for your defence, and that you get a better defence if you've got a private lawyer, how's that justice system? It's not, is it? Any system that depends on who you are as to whether you even go to court, and we all know that, you know, the ones that are protected and don't even end up in court. These management, I mean, that have been, I mean, these farcical arrests of the management for these farcical whatever reasons. I mean, the management, we know that some of them tried to stick up for Lucy, but they then capitulated into the what was taking advice from lawyers of what was, you know, going to protect their position and their financial mess, and they gave in and they allowed this to happen. Whether they believed it would go as far as her getting the convictions, I don't know, but they gave in. And I saw her mention the other day about, I think it was Jenny was mentioning about other nurses, and she's right. You know, it's really bad that some nurses just, you know, allowed this to happen, and they could have stuck up more for Lucy. But I would also say that I think there were nurses, there was at least one, if not more nurses, who did want to testify on Lucy's behalf, and they were told not to. I think they were threatened with their jobs. Now, that is interfering with the course of justice by the hospital management. And however, I'm sure they did it verbally, because they would know damn well that they shouldn't be doing that. And if that was in writing anywhere, that would be, you know, that they would be in big trouble, you know, because interfering in the course of justice, they would end up in court for that. They could end up in court for that themselves. So, although, let's face it, all these people with contempt of court and perjury are just getting away with it, aren't they? What's happened? Why hasn't Joanne been, you know, well, nothing's happened over David Davis writing to the chief of police. I said, nothing's happened. You know, these people, yeah, and the game book they play is always to just delay things forever till people forget about it. And that is why, this is what they do with all their inquiries, just keep them going forever till everyone's forgotten and can't be bothered and isn't interested anymore. You know, Thurwell, I mean, we'll probably still be waiting for our inquiry in 2040. I'll be dead. I'll be definitely dead. I mean, yeah, I'll be dead before Thurwell's inquiry report, if it ever does get published. And yeah, it's just delay. That they know that's a great tactic they use. Divide and rule and delay are two of their main tactics. All right. So don't look at the king. Look over here. Look at him. Don't look at the king. Never look at the king. Look elsewhere. That's divide and rule. Look at your neighbour. It's his fault. Don't ever look at the king. And delay. You know, what never do today what can be put off till tomorrow. Right? The total opposite of what is actually beneficial in life. But there you go. But it's beneficial to them because they're sick bastards. When I say they, people think, who the hell are you talking about? And, you know, I'm just talking about people who hold the control, whether it's the big corporations, BlackRock, people like that, but also the shady figures behind the royals and who engineer things as Mr. Rabbit and all these big shady figures that we don't see. We don't see the real power. We see the figureheads. We don't see the people who actually control them behind the scenes, or whatever forces. I mean, you know, by the way, it's appeal judges. They very much do watch a public opinion and they do respond to it. So if they see that the public are widely believing that Lucy Letby is innocent or starting to turn, they will be affected by that. And that is every little bit that's put out there about Lucy helps. So And I think that, and the things that can help her now are just looking at this new evidence as much as possible, if there's any new evidence, and also arguing the case that we shouldn't have to have new evidence. That should not be the case, because that, again, is unfair to people who have crap lawyers. I'm not saying Ben lawyers is totally crap, but I'm saying that people who don't have a decent defence because they've had to rely on legal aid or for whatever other reasons should not be discriminated against, because evidence that was clearly there and should have been brought up during the trial was ignored. They should be able to go over old arguments if those arguments haven't been made properly. And so our legal system is a joke, and that needs to be addressed. I'm going to something on miscarriage of justice soon, and I'm going in London. I'm going to see if things are addressed there or not. But free Lucy, and see you all later. I'll put some links below and links to my article. Bye.